Well, hello there. Welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. Well, today I wanted to share with you my thoughts on a recent release from the Criterion Collection. This is a title from French director Bertrand Tavernier, and I believe this is the very first title from this French director to enter the Criterion Collection. It's his film from 1986, stars Dexter Gordon, and is called Round Midnight. This comes in at spy number 1122 in the Criterion Collection, and this is one fascinating film. So this is a film that comes in at about 131 minutes. It stars Dexter Gordon. He plays a character named Dale Turner in this film. So Dale Turner is a jazz musician. He's a saxophone player, a tenor, and Dexter Gordon does an amazing job embodying this character. Of course, Dexter Gordon was in real life a jazz musician himself. So he was a jazz musician who came up during the bebop movement of the 1950s, thereabout. He embodied this role so perfectly and just did an amazing job playing this performance of Dale Turner, who was a broken man at this point in his life. So he was a musician that's sort of at the end of his career, toward the latter days of his life, decides to leave America, to leave New York City and move to Paris to sort of play the rest of his days in a Paris nightclub called the Blue Note. And it's a really fascinating role that Dexter Gordon has embodied here. And he did such an amazing job that he was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor that year for this role, which was amazing because this was his very first feature film appearance, and he gets nominated for an Oscar. So congrats to Dexter Gordon for that. And of course, you hear a lot about Dexter Gordon in the special features from his widow, Maxine Gordon, as well as several other players and the director himself. They speak very highly of Dexter Gordon and his performance and Dexter Gordon as a man. You hear a lot about that in the supplements for this release. So I really enjoyed going through this release and really experiencing this film. And the way I would describe this experience of watching this film is really a character study. This is not a film that is heavy on plot and heavy on, your traditional narrative structure. It really comes down to a character study of this man, Dale Turner, in this film, played by Dexter Gordon, a jazz musician who is at the end of his life, or toward the end of his life, and he's just run down and tired. I mean, he's a brilliant musician. He plays in the Blue Note every night with his band, and that's one of the best aspects of this film is the jazz performances, which were actually played during the filming. They actually filmed the performances of these jazz performers. So it wasn't a situation where the jazz music was recorded separately in the studio and then put on the film in post-production or what have you. They actually shot these performances, and you're getting real authentic jazz performances played by Dexter Gordon with his saxophone and the band around him. So I really feel like that gave these nightclub performances a more organic feel because you're actually watching real jazz performances. And I think that's something that if you love jazz music, if you love music in general, if you like an atmospheric nightclub type musical experience, you get that in spades with Round Midnight. So highly, highly recommended from that regard if you're a fan of music. So this film is very much a character study. It is not heavy on plot. You just follow the life of this man, Dale Turner, as he's struggling with his own personal demons. He's dealing with alcoholism and drugs, although he's also a brilliant performer, but he's also dealing with these addictions in his life. He also has, a distant relationship with his daughter who still lives back in New York City. She's a teenager, but he barely has a relationship with her. And so you see these struggles that he's dealing with in his life, but he's befriended by another man who also is broken in his life. And this is a man played by François Cluzet named Francis Boyer. So he is a single father. He has a teenage daughter as well that he's trying to raise. He's estranged from his ex-wife, of course. He's a struggling graphic design artist trying to make ends meet, raise his daughter, but he has a love and an affinity for jazz music. In particular, he loves the compositions of Dale Turner in this film. He loves Dale Turner, the jazz musician. And so, you know, he starts to attend these performances at the Blue Note, strikes up a friendship with Dale Turner. And this film is very much about following the story of Dale Turner in his journey at this point in his life, having moved to Paris. And you see his struggles, you see his relationships with the people that he lives with in this apartment complex. So he lives in this sort of rundown apartment building. And one of the most interesting characters in this film was the landlady in this apartment building, played by Sandra Reeves Phillips. She plays a character named Buttercup, and she is a delight in this film. I love her in this film. I love several of the characters that are in this apartment building living together with Dale Turner. And I just think that's one of the best aspects of this film is the apartment scenes, as well as the scenes on the streets of Paris, the scenes in the nightclub. You really get a sense of being in a time and a place, because this film came out in 1986, but it's a period piece. So this period takes you to 1950s Paris. So that's the period that this film is taking place in the 1950s in Paris, in this smoky nightclub where you have this nice sultry jazz music playing at night. You see Dale Turner and Frances walking the streets of Paris, and you get that atmosphere of being in Paris. And you see them in this rundown apartment. This film definitely puts you in a time and in a place, and that's really what I appreciated about this film. In addition to the great jazz music, feeling like you're in 1950s Paris is a takeaway that I got from watching this film. So again, like I said, this is not a film that's incredibly strong on plot or your traditional narrative structure. It's really about just following this character during these days in his life, seeing his friendship with Frances Boullier and their extended relationships with the people in the apartment building, Frances Boulier's extended family, Frances Boulier's daughter, and just all of those characters coming together to form a very fascinating network. Really provides a lot of character, I think, to this film. So I really enjoyed Round Midnight from that perspective. So overall, as a film, I definitely recommend it, as long as you understand that it's more of a character study. You can definitely get a lot out of the jazz performances in this film. That's one of the biggest pluses of this film in my mind. And I highly recommend it on that basis if you're a lover of music, particularly jazz music. So thumbs up on Round Midnight, the film. Now, how does this film look on video and audio? I'll just cut to the chase here. This is a new 4K digital restoration, and it looks very good. I mean, this film looks very nice in high definition. So it's a film from 1986. They did a 4K scan of the original camera negative, if I remember correctly reading the insert here. So I'm going to read this about the restoration. So this new 4K digital restoration was created from the 35mm original camera negative, scanned on an Arascan film scanner at Les Images Retrouvées in Paris. Whenever I hear 4K scan, original camera negative, 35mm, that makes me feel very, very good about the potential quality, especially if they do a good job with the scan and cleaning it up. And what you get here is a very clean picture with a nice amount of detail, a thin layer of grain. And this picture, I think, does a really nice job of being faithful to representing the production design and the art design of this film, which is about making you feel like you're in Paris, France, putting you in a time and a place, and the building of that atmosphere with the streets of Paris, the atmosphere in the Blue Note nightclub, and the atmosphere of being in that apartment building. I really feel like, especially in that apartment building, you get some nice detail of, because it's a rundown building, you know, and you see the detail in the painting and in the texture of the walls and the doors and the colors. It's just so beautifully rendered in high definition. It just makes you sort of feel like you're in that apartment building with Dale Turner. So I like that. The jazz club sequences look really nice in high definition, and the streets of Paris, I think, are realized very nicely. I think the colors look really nice in this film. So overall, the picture quality, I thought, was excellent. Now, it's not 100% super tack sharp. It's not a newer type film. This is a film that's, you know, about 35 years old. So it's not going to look like it was, you know, shot yesterday, but it's a very strong high definition image. And I think they did a really nice job of the restoration and cleaning this film up very nicely. So I think you'll be very pleased with this Blu-ray of Round Midnight. Now, in terms of how it sounds, you have a couple of options. You have a 2.0 surround DTS HD master audio soundtrack, which sounds pretty good, but I think my preference is the alternate 5.1 surround soundtrack. Of course, especially with those jazz performances, you get that nice surround, sound going, and you feel it's almost more enveloping. You almost feel like you're in a jazz nightclub. If you just close your eyes and you have a surround system going, you almost can, believe that you're in a real jazz concert in a jazz nightclub. So I really dug the sound. I think the sound was really nice with this film and really, did justice to the jazz performances in this movie. So I really dug that. As far as the special features are a big reason to consider this release from the Criterion Collection, especially, again, if you're a jazz music fan. One of the things you're really going to get from this release is you're going to get an appreciation for the history of jazz music. So you're going to learn a lot about the history of jazz music, particularly the bebop movement, which was a form of jazz music that I think is really interesting. I was sort of looking it up on Wikipedia to sort of learn more about it, but you learn a little bit about the bebop movement. You learn a lot about the history of jazz in Paris and the fact that a lot of Black musicians during this time of the 1940s and 1950s moved to Paris, France, and performed in Paris and built a culture around jazz music and a movement of jazz in Europe, in Paris, France during this time that has resonance to this day. And that's something I didn't know anything about that until I went through this release. And so I really, really appreciated that about this release. But this release has a ton of fantastic special features that I definitely would recommend that you listen to. So the first is an interview with jazz and cultural critic Gary Giddens. Really enjoyed his interview because he talks about his relationship with Bertrand Tavernier. He talks about the fact that when he first reviewed this film, Round Midnight, he was very critical of it. Bertrand Tavernier wrote him a letter, just explained the intentions that went into the decisions that he made in making this film. And a few years later, they actually met in person and struck up a friendship. So I think that was interesting listening to. You also have a new conversation with music producer Michael Kusuna and author Maxine Gordon, who was the widow of Dexter Gordon, who starred in this film. Maxine Gordon provided a lot of context around Dexter Gordon. Of course, she was his wife, and so she knew him and was able to give us a glimpse into this man, who he was, and his motivations for embodying this character, Dale Turner. Of course, the character Dale Turner in this film, Round Midnight, was inspired by real life jazz musicians Lester Young and Bud Powell. So those were the inspirations for this character that Dexter Gordon played in this film. And so just a lot of fascinating history there. So I love that interview with Maxine Gordon. You also get a behind the scenes documentary. In here, you get a panel discussion. My favorite supplement on here is the panel discussion from 2014 with Kusuna, Maxine Gordon, director Bertrand Tavernier. Of course, he was still with us then in 2014. And jazz scholar John Swed, moderated by jazz critic and broadcaster Mark Ruffin. So that was about a 35-minute panel discussion, and that was by far my favorite supplement on this release from Criterion, because they are funny, they cut up, they crack jokes, and they share a lot about the production of this film and what went into the film, and also the history of jazz music and why this film is so important in portraying this aspect of the history of music in America and in Paris. So really enjoyed that panel discussion on here. It's one of the best supplements I think that I've seen this year so far from on any Criterion release. I highly recommend that panel discussion from 2014. And then you get a performance from 1969 of Fried Bananas by Dexter Gordon from 1969, which is very interesting. I thought that was cool. And then on the inside, you get an essay on the included leaflet from Mark Anthony Neal. And this is a nice leaflet that I almost ripped just now. Whew, would have hated that. But you get Round Midnight. Of course, over here, the restoration information and other info. And on the inside, you get this essay, Return from Exile, from Mark Anthony Neal, which is an excellent essay in here, which again talks a lot about, about the history of jazz music, talks about these musicians who made their mark in Paris, France in the 1940s and 1950s, talks about Dexter Gordon and the production of Round Midnight. And then of course on the inside, I love this picture. Love this picture. Check out, this is the Blue Note. This is the jazz club, nightclub that they made as part of the production design of this film. They created the set for the Blue Note, and that's a huge part of the atmosphere of this film. But I love this picture on the inside of the case. And I love the overall art design, production design, whatever you want to call it, that they put into making this film, because it really puts you in a time and a place in 1950s Paris. So overall, this is a very, very good release from the Criterion Collection that I highly recommend, especially if you love jazz music, if you like history, if you like the history of music, definitely check out Round Midnight. I've got a link in the description if you're interested in purchasing this. Of course, it's an Amazon link, Amazon affiliate link. And if you use that link to purchase this release from the Criterion Collection, of course, it helps the channel with no additional cost to you. So just wanted to let you know about that. But this release definitely comes recommended if you like jazz music. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this release from the Criterion Collection. If you have it, or if you've seen Round Midnight, what you think about this particular film. And also let me know what films from Bertrand Tavernier that you would recommend. This is the first title that I've seen from this director. Let me know what other films you would recommend from this French director. Let me know that in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.